Thank you, Roger. I should have noted for this audience in particular that in a previous incarnation, Roger was a vice president and special assistant to the chairman of the board of a company here in town, as I recall, Chase Manhattan Bank, before he went into the administration of Ronald Reagan. Thank you. The unenviable task I have is trying to truncate a whole series of presentations that I would love to have go much longer, as I know would you. But we will have some time, if we're disciplined, to actually engage in a bit of Q&A. Next up, I'm very pleased to have a friend and colleague of many years as well, Gordon Chang. Gordon is well known, I'm sure, to this audience and many others besides, from his myriad appearances as one of the country's real duty experts on Asia, specifically on China, as the author of 3 terrific books, The Coming Collapse of China being particularly relevant, also Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and most recently, Losing South Korea. He's a contributor to the Daily Beast, and I'm pleased to say to my radio program, Secure Freedom Radio, each week. Gordon Chang, where are you? Come forth. Thank you very much. He's going to talk about... We've asked Gordon to talk a little bit about unrestricted warfare, a term that's in the title of this program, and specifically how it applies in the economic battle space, notably in the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you. Gordon. Welcome. Good to have
you. The Committee on the Present Danger, China, is the first line of defense of our free society and free societies everywhere. It is truly an honor for me to be here today, so thank you so much, Frank. As Frank mentioned, China is conducting unrestricted warfare against the United States, and this challenge is multifaceted. It is military, diplomatic, technological, it is ideological, and it's political. But there's also one other aspect that Roger just mentioned. When the Belt and Road Initiative was first announced in 2013 to connect the great cities of China's coast to Europe and the points in between, this was limited to those routes. But subsequently, it's been broadened to the rest of the world. So we do know that China's challenge is global, and that global challenge is economic. And as Roger mentioned, the struggle is going to be determined, I believe, by the country which has the stronger economy. After all, the Soviet Union gained adherence when its economy looked strong, and it lost the Cold War when it was apparent it could not keep up. This is the way the world is. It's unfortunate, but unfortunately, that's where we are. And we're seeing the same dynamic this century as well. China is gaining ground because people think its economy is strong, especially after the global downturn in 2008. The Chinese, who have always been full of confidence, then became even more arrogant, maintaining that they would dominate and rule the world, and that the United States and the rest of the West was in decline. So one of the ways to meet Beijing's challenge, and perhaps the primary way to meet that challenge, is to outcompete, outgrow, outproduce China. And that means everything is on the line in the trade talks between the United States and China. This is our opportunity to define our future, and this is an opportunity for us to not save communists in China. The United States has saved Chinese communism a number of times, starting with President Nixon. Now, President Nixon in the early 1970s, when he saw Mao Zedong, people could argue it was a good thing for us to do because that was, for us, most people thought, a weak point in the Cold War. But we also saved communism in China in 1989 after the Tiananmen massacre. Bush 41 did that, and he didn't have a good reason to 30 years ago. And by the way, we mark that anniversary this June. President Clinton didn't have a reason to do that in 1999 when he inked the agreement with Beijing that paved its way into the World Trade Organization. And we certainly do not have a reason to do that now, especially now, because somebody who I think is the world's most dangerous figure, Xi Jinping, needs a lifeline. Xi Jinping's economy is weak. The official National Bureau of Statistics says that China grew 6.6% last year, but that number is obviously too high. It's inflated. In December, a professor at Renmin University in Beijing said in 2018, China would grow no more than 1.67%. He said the economy might even contract. And that sounds about right. In March, where there was slight rebound, that followed 3 months of evident contraction. But this rebound in March was caused by something that the Chinese leaders said that they would never do, and that is to flood their economy with debt. Because of this debt, there is a small recovery, but that recovery is not sustainable. If you look at what they've been doing over the last couple months, they have been creating debt at a pace which is 5.5 times faster than the production of nominal GDP. That's up from a pace of 1.5 times just a year ago. So this is not sustainable. What is sustainable for China is signing a trade deal with the United States. So I say, let's not sign. And there are 5 reasons I'll talk about today for not signing. First of all, Beijing has not honored any of the previous trade deals with the United States or with the international community. So why do we think that we should remedy this problem by signing another agreement with China? Second, the Chinese system does not believe in the notion of comparative advantage, which underpins the global trading system. So what's the point of talking with Beijing? Third, an agreement is going to open up the Chinese economy to American companies. That means they're going to become more involved in China, and that means we become, not only they, but we become more vulnerable to Beijing. Even if it were in our interest to become more vulnerable, and of course it's not, but even if it were in our interest to do that, it's not going to do our companies any good because Xi Jinping has been hostile to foreign companies. Xi Jinping, for about a half-decade, has been reversing reform, increasing the power of the state. When you increase the power of the state, you make it much more difficult for foreign companies to prosper. And we've seen this with something that Roger mentioned, which is the Made in China 2025 program. Fourth, Xi Jinping does not believe in the legitimacy of the Westphalian international system. For more than a decade, he's been dropping hints that China is the world's only sovereign state. So what's the point of helping somebody who actually believes this? And fifth, China has been using the proceeds of commerce with the U.S. to expand their military, while their senior officers have openly been talking about killing Americans. Twice in December, a senior officer of the People's Liberation Army urged in public unprovoked attacks on the U.S. Navy in the global commons. In the second of these outbursts, which occurred on the 20th, a rear admiral said that China should use its Dongfeng 21D and Dongfeng 26 missiles to sink 2 aircraft carriers and kill 10,000 Americans. Now, this statement is not official policy of Beijing, but nonetheless, it is believed to reflect thinking in the senior ranks of the Chinese military. So why should we help this admiral and his colleagues in this particular circumstance? And let's remember, the Chinese have gone beyond just talking about this. Last May, the Wall Street Journal reported that China lasered a U.S. C-130 from their overseas military base in Djibouti, injuring 2 pilots. You injure 2 pilots, you have to assume that they're trying to bring down the plane. If you're trying to bring down a plane, you're trying to kill the crew. We also learned that last spring that China caused brain injuries to our diplomats in the Guangzhou consulate. So, why are we maintaining cordial relations with this country? What should we do on trade? Well, first of all, I think that President Trump should cancel the tariff increase reprieve that he granted in February. I also think that we should increase the tariffs beyond that 25%, and we should ban the importation of goods into the United States that have benefited from the theft of U.S. intellectual property, and we should ban the importation of goods sold by any company that has stolen American IP. We can do this. Many people say that we can't, but we got to remember that last year, China's merchandise trade surplus with the United States accounted for 129.6% of its overall merchandise surplus. 129.6%. So China's overwhelming dependence on the U.S. gives President Trump extraordinary leverage over the Chinese. Now, most everyone believes that the United States and China cannot separate their economies, but Chinese leaders are concerned about it. Premier Li Keqiang, at his once-a-year press conference in March of this year, said, look, the decoupling of U.S. and China is neither realistic nor possible. Well, if it's not possible, then why is he talking about it? Will disengagement hurt us? Yes, of course it will. But we've got to remember that we're already suffering grievous wounds. Each year, China steals hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property. Some people say it's only $150 billion. Other people say $600 billion. But whatever it is, it's much too large. We have an innovation-based economy. If we cannot commercialize our innovation, we do not have an economy of the future. The one thing that disengagement will do is it will decrease the opportunities for Chinese parties to steal U.S. IP. I can understand the motivations for the Chinese to steal, but what I can't understand is why we as a nation have let them do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is on us. We need to disengage. We need to disengage now. I not only say no trade deals with countries that want to kill Americans, I say also no trade with them at all. And by God, we should not rescue Chinese communism again. Thank you.
Gordon, thank you very much for very important messages on several fronts. I did want to just say that the senior military officers that he mentioned who were calling for attacks on American carrier battle groups